Hi, everyone. Welcome to Like a Boss, where we help you rise to the top, be an influencer in who you are. I'm super excited to be introducing you to someone that I've had deep conversations with. This interview, this show is really for you ladies and men, but really for you ladies. And this is going to be a very personal interview about myself. I'm going to be opening up a lot about my own life, things I don't talk about normally publicly. And I reached out to my own Facebook group, my own personal group, and asked for someone like Karen to come on and talk about this very personal topic. So I'm going to introduce you to Karen. So first of all, she's across the world. She's in Australia. Karen, are you there?
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. It's afternoon
6
here.
a.m. here.
What time is it there?
6 a.m.
6 a.m. Okay, that's super early. So thanks for getting your makeup on. Really, I appreciate that. So let me introduce you to who Karen Battersby is. First of all, she's in Australia, across the world. Karen describes herself as a truth seeker and a truth teller. Her warm, authentic nature and direct communication style combine to ensure that her clients have both direction and support. Karen is a passionate advocate of personal development, growth, and living life authentically. She sees her own development not just as a way to live, but her belief that in life is a learning journey, but also to bring new tools to her clients. And Karen specializes in working with women rebuilding their lives after leaving toxic and narcissistic relationships, and is soon to release her first book on the topic, Fix Your Man Picker. I needed you about 4 years ago. That's
People say that all the time, Heather. Why didn't I read that book 10 years ago?
Right. Okay, so let me tell this audience a little bit. I reached out to my group on Facebook and said, hey, I want to, anybody here have an expert in narcissism? And I'll be sharing a little bit of story about that today through the process. And the reason is because I'm definitely not an expert in narcissism. I've gone through a relationship recently, broke up with one, been very heartache relationship with a narcissist. But I wanted to bring you on, Karen, today to kind of share with everybody some tips and tricks, but more or less signs that they may be getting into a relationship with a narcissist. So let's start off there. You have a PDF about, seven signs that you may or may not be getting into a relationship with a narcissist. But let's start with your background. I mean, I kind of read your bio, but let's start with your background. How did you get here?
So I actually work with men who use violence, and obviously they're overrepresented amongst those are narcissists and people who feel very entitled, and other cluster B. Studied psychology and have had a real fascination with personality disorders. And I've been in my own relationship with a narcissist. So a lot of the stuff that I talk about and bring to my clients is not just the clinical theoretical background, but the experience of having lived through those types of experiences as well. So yeah, a relationship with a narcissist is like no other relationship, is it?
It's very hard to describe. You and I have had some pretty intimate conversations about it. I honestly can tell you 5 years ago, if I had met you and had this interview, it would have been like, whatever. That sounds like someone with a big ego, after going through a relationship with a narcissist and having a very heartbreaking and expensive on all fronts breakup with one, it's been a whole nother world. I'm a different person after the breakup, and you and I have talked about that personally. I think that one of the reasons I want to bring you on is kind of sharing my own personal story, but also to really understand that it's a personality disorder. And I want you to kind of touch on that even when you're dealing with, and you've mentioned this before, and I want you to kind of go down this road because I think it's fascinating how you work with men who use violence, sometimes domestic violence, in their relationships, and yet still they don't, from what I understand, don't take responsibility. I think that's sad, but I love your word, fascinating. It's a better view. It's more of a curiosity view versus just like a make wrong, Let's start at the beginning. I'm going to ask questions. narcissism, is it usually in our society today, is it more men than women?
It is slightly more men than women. So 6% of the population are diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. But having said that, it falls on a spectrum. So there are probably hundreds of thousands of other people that wouldn't actually qualify for a diagnosis of NPD, but have lots of strong traits. Because you have to have something like 7 of these qualifying criteria, if you like, in order to get a diagnosis. But there'd be sort of, hundreds of thousands of other people who, might have 4 or 5 of them, but wouldn't actually qualify for a diagnosis. So it is, hugely represented out there in the population. And yes, there are slightly more men than women who, but it does manifest in different ways too. So when we think about narcissism, we tend to think, grandiosity, but there's also what we call covert narcissism, and women will often be sort of more involved in that kind of end of the spectrum, which are the coercion and the manipulation tactics. Heather, I've just lost sound. I don't know what's happened, but I can't hear you.
Yeah, that was me putting on mute. Okay, so let's start with men, just because, and this is not against men or any at all. I just want to kind of pick a segment for women specifically to know when they are potentially getting signs where they're getting a relationship with a narcissist. Because I will say, on the other side of a relationship with a narcissist, it's devastating on such a core level that it's hard to even describe. And I remember our very first interview or very first talk on the phone, I said, what did I say? I'm YouTube narcissist certified, because I've spent 50 hours or whatever listening to therapists around the world doing their YouTube videos on narcissism. So I'm certified in YouTube narcissism certification. But I really don't know the nuances. So let's start there. How is it a personality disorder, and is it born or created?
Wow, that's one of those huge, nature or nurture questions, Heather. The reality is what they have found is that, there is something that's inherent genetically there in people who have these personality disorders. And then often there's, a trigger event as far as trauma in childhood or that kind of thing. So, there's a huge proportion of it that is just inherent personality trait. But having said that, there's also the environmental stuff. So it's neither and both.
It's neither and both. Thanks. That was great, Doc.
Sorry. I know.
Now, from what I've read, again, my certification of YouTube, is that narcissism usually it's more created from the environment, less than born. So they talked about like a psycho, basically, is born, or sociopath is created from the environment. It's almost like a response to their environment growing up. Do you find specifically with men that there's some issue with their mother specifically? I'm kind of barking down a tree, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. They nearly all come from some kind of trauma background. So they've had trauma in their own childhood. That's the reality. They were victims once upon a time too.
Yeah, they were victims too. So of course the victim usually becomes the perpetrator, right? Okay, so let's go down that road. You deal specifically with men who have used some type of violence. In your experience of working with those men, one, my first question as a woman, can they be fixed? That's my first question. But number two, do they see they did anything wrong?
This falls on a spectrum. If you're talking about people who have narcissistic personality disorder, no, they don't take responsibility for their actions generally. So they are highly unlikely to see what they've done as being wrong, and very, very unlikely to change. Not everybody who uses violence is going to be a narcissist.
Right.
And so that end of the spectrum we would have more success with. But somebody who is diagnosed as a narcissist, has a narcissistic personality disorder, very, very unlikely to change, and rarely will they take responsibility for the violence.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so let's talk about the signs. We were going to go down 7, but we don't have time for 7. So let's pick 3. Top 3 signs that someone knows they're dating a narcissist. Let's just pick one. What's the first one?
Right. So entitlement is the first one that I would say. It's quite obvious, but it can be very in lots of different sort of subtle ways. So they literally believe that the world revolves around them. They believe that they are special. And so why shouldn't they have preferential treatment? Why shouldn't they be at the center of your universe? Why shouldn't you subjugate all of your own needs, wants, desires in order to further their life or their career or what they want, or, you know, meeting all of their needs in the relationship? So that sense of entitlement, that means that they'll then exploit people as well. You know, I deserve to have the things that I want, and the ends, you know, the end justifies the means. And so that sense of entitlement permeates everything that they do.
I want to talk about this for just a second. Like I said, 5 years ago, if I had this conversation with you, I would have been like, okay, someone who's an ego. That's every millennial. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. There's something I'm going to add to this just a little bit from my experience. So when the word entitlement, like I said, that sounds like someone with high self-confidence. In my experience with this last breakup, there was literally like, I don't know how to say it. When we were in a relationship, if he thought that someone he doesn't thought was stupid, his words were, that person's stupid. You can't think of any, you know, whatever they say is stupid. They're stupid. If I even thought I liked that person or what they said, I'm now stupid. You know, it got to that. It was like everyone in his world thought he was the king. And if anyone questioned that, specifically because he happened to be a doctor, then it was like, you're stupid. How dare you question me? It was like, no, you're just stupid. You're just dumb. You're just dumb. You're dumb to even think or question me. I didn't know how much I was sucked into that until aftermath of looking at my life going, wow, I got to a point, I was shutting off so many people in my life, coaches and friends and counselors. Like and then I would look to him subconsciously, like, did he like or agree with that person? If he did, then I would listen to him. If he didn't, then I would literally shut them out. I didn't even see myself doing it until looking back, right? Hindsight 2020, because I'm a pretty smart and intelligent person. And I had all these people in my life. They were like, you weren't listening to me at all. And you weren't, what's your deal? Why are you not open? And I've had to learn to be open again. I've had to learn to be open to other people's views, because I even noticed, even now, I would say, they're stupid. I don't believe in them. And I thought to myself, is that me talking? Is that really what I think? Or was that his view? And I just projected that. I took that on. I think it even goes beyond just entitlement. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it's like you're stupid, AKA whoever they are. You're stupid for even thinking the other person is right or wrong. Right.
So what you're really talking about there is you're challenging their self-image, and they've got this false sense of self, right? They don't have a true identity the way you and I might have a true identity. They have a fake self or a fake identity. And when you challenge that, then they disassociate from it. So they'll either simply discredit or deny, which is what you're describing there. No, yeah, that's how it is. Because remember, they're in complete self-denial about who they are. They can't face any of the worst qualities of themselves. They just don't see them. And so that self-denial has to go really, really deep. And so anything at all that contradicts that image that they have of themselves, so someone who disagrees with them, for instance, just has to be completely discredited and denied. Anything that doesn't fit with their view of themselves or their worldview. Mm-hmm. So what you're talking about there is that sort of, they live in, it's magical thinking. They live in a fantasy world where they are God, they are the center. So entitlement is a very, I guess you would say, oh, well, all millennials are entitled. Yeah, sure. But this is, once you've encountered it, you understand we're not talking about, people being slightly, the word narcissistic has kind of been hijacked. Everybody, all millennials are narcissistic. No, they're not. When you actually meet somebody who falls on this spectrum, you begin to understand what narcissism truly is and what entitlement really looks like. And we're not just talking about, I think I'm special and I've been wrapped in cotton wool. We're talking on steroids.
Yeah, it's on steroids. My view around it, my way that I've had to put it in my head to understand it, my view is thinking like a kingdom, like a castle, and there's like a moat around the castle, and he or she, the narcissist, the king, and anybody he allows in that little castle, they're okay. But the moment someone in the castle questions them on anything or like someone outside of the castle, they're like booted. And then it creates this fear of everyone else in the castle. Like, oh, I don't want to be booted out. So they all like cling back. It like creates some more like, oh, he must be right. Look, they're gone. You know, they've been booted out of the castle. Now they're on the other side of the moat. They can't get back in. He must be right. I mean, it's such a, and when this particular person and I obviously broke up, I lost my world, all of it done, because they doubled down on the king and the castle. And so I got booted out of the moat, but I lost every single person that I had ever talked to the last 3 or 4 years, you know? And it becomes this, if you believe her, or if you listen to her, aka the person that got kicked out, you're an idiot. You know, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you're wrong, or you're going to get kicked out. So it creates this, not only that they're right, but a fear across everyone else. There's like a different level of it. Because I think in our society today, we come across, I think, as everyone's like, if you're egocentric, people don't like that. I think there's another level with narcissists. They have this ability to get people to believe in their stuff, whatever their stuff is. And if anyone questions that, they literally get kicked out. And so that tribe mentality like kicks in. You know, they don't want to be kicked out of the tribe or something, you know? And it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy, and you've absolutely captured there exactly the way that is. They can be very, very charismatic and charming.
Oh.
And if you are agreeing with their view of the world and their self-identity, then you're valuable to them. But the minute you're not agreeing to that, you are of no value, and the discard is complete.
Yeah, you were like shut out on the other side of the moat, not allowed back into the castle at all, and you're booted from their life. Like, it is so hardcore. It's a black or white thing. It is not a gray type of deal at all. I think it's that isn't even not even titled. There's got to be another word for that. It's like you're either in my life and you're believing everything I say and drinking my Kool-Aid, or you are not. You're the enemy. You know, it's like that's the only choices.
They call that splitting. So, you know, you're either you're idolized and you're the best and most wonderful person in the world, or I completely hate you and you're dead to me. So that's splitting, you know. And that's exactly how they practice. You're in or you're out. There's no halfway.
There's no halfway, right? And so just to be, you know, transparent, a little, I had to be careful. My father is narcissist, so of course I date and almost marry one, right? So that's no shock to anyone here listening, potentially, if they understand that. I was used to that behavior, okay? And as of currently we're talking, my father, I crossed the moat on him too, and he refuses to speak to me. Quote, I'm dead to him. And he said that to me when I looked at him and told him I loved him, and his response was, you're dead to me. It was like, you know, one of those things where just questioning him or trying to engage with him in a more of an authentic way. And of course the response is, you're on the other side of the moat. And then everyone that's in his castle, as I call it, his little castle, won't talk to me, right? They will not reach out. They've all blocked me. Not because they have a particular view of me or any kind of relationship with me. It's because they listen to whatever he says is right. None of them have reached out to me and said, well, I don't care what he thinks. Like, I want to have a relationship with you, sister, brother, you know, stepmom. It's more like, well, he says you're horrible, so you must be horrible.
Yeah. And, you know, you've touched on something really important there, Heather, that I'd just love to latch hold of for a second, if you don't mind. That comment about having had a parent who was a narcissist, the reality is a lot of people who get into relationships with one have that familial background. So this is one of the things I cover in my book, because, you know, it's almost like one of the prerequisites, because it does feel familiar. You're used to having this man or this person who's at the orbit, the center of the universe in the family, and everybody has just gravitated or orbited around that individual. And so, yeah, it does. It creates that sense of familiarity, and we seek it out in our partners as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so no surprise. Like I said, I'm certified YouTube video. So that's how That's my first go-to. I'm going to go type in what's a narcissist on YouTube, and like 50 hours later, forget Netflix. I got YouTube. Okay, let's go down the second sign. Let's go down another sign. What's another sign?
So they don't take responsibility. So,
of course.
they rarely apologize. And even if they do apologize, it's not a genuine apology. It's something along the lines of, I'm sorry you feel that way. And you think about that. That's not an apology at all.
You made me do it.
Right.
You triggered me. You made me do that to you. You shouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have said that back.
Yep, you've got it. That's exactly how it goes. There's always a reason. It's never their fault. And even if they can't think of something right in the moment, maybe they've done something that's just so devastatingly, lacking in empathy that they can't think of a reason at the moment. They'll circle back over the next few weeks or months with a story that then makes it your fault. So always putting responsibility back on you or external circumstances, but mostly the person who's in intimate relationships with them. Never their fault. Nothing. Never
their fault. Yeah. So, again, I have, intimate relationship with one past and a father. And wow, you talk about, especially with my father, once I figured that one out and saw the behavior in the relationship, one, there was never an apology. If there was a type of apology, I kind of craved that he's apologizing, but he really never did, because it always came back to, well, you should have never said this, and I would have never X or done that. And me being a very empathetic person and always wanting to get better, I would always look at, well, what did I say that really caused you to be upset like that? That's where I went, right? I automatically went to, well, what did I say? How can I say that better so that you can feel more loving or whatever, which falls right into their trap, really, because at the end of the day, it's like, no, I said what I said. I'm sorry you felt that way. And no, it wasn't my fault that you responded that. You're responsible for your reactions. But as an empathetic person and as someone who's constantly looking to go to the next level, it's one of those, like, I just fell for that trap of just like, well, I can see how you feel that way. And so let me reorganize myself for you, which fell into the trap of who am I, which is when I got out of the relationship, I was in this big, like, who the hell am I, right? We talked about that, the identity break, because it was like, I didn't even know who I was. I had put myself in such a pretzel for making him happy, all right, that I didn't even know when I got out of the relationship who the pretzel was. I didn't even know what part was actually me and what part was actually, I put myself in that position for him. I just couldn't see it. So
yeah, look, and the best type of control is coercive control, right? Because that's where you amend your own behaviour to meet my needs.
Right.
So then the argument is, well, I didn't ask you to do that. You've changed. You did that. You chose that. So coercive control is incredibly powerful. And you've talked about, what makes us ideal, I guess, I'm going to use the word victims or survivors, whatever word you want to use. Mm-hmm. Why are we ideal for narcissists? Why are we an ideal source of this supply for them? Well, because we do look at our own behaviour and we do go, okay, how can I be better? I don't want to trigger this person, or, I always look to my own behaviour first. Right. And that's powerful for them, because it means you're going to take responsibility all the time.
Right. Well, yeah, because I was taught in my personal development that when we own our responsibility, we're more powerful. Well, that's true, as long as the other person's healthy too, and they're being personally responsible. Not when you're taking responsibility for everything and everyone and every problem, including theirs. Recently, I guess I had to be careful, but I was in a situation with the other person recently. And I found it fascinating it was in a deposition, I don't know how else to say that. And I found it fascinating that there were some challenges that the lawyers were going through and asking him questions. And he was throwing everyone under the bus. Everyone, even though it was his business or whatever, he was even throwing his own lawyer under the bus. I was just like, wow. He's not responsible for anything, he was just like, oh, that's not my fault. Oh, I didn't do that. Oh, it's not my fault. Oh, that must have been my assistant. That must have been somebody else. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. It was just so ridiculous. And the fascinating part of that particular situation I got to be in with that person is luckily I didn't have to interact with them. So I kind of was looking like a fishbowl, you know, it's kind of like in a fishbowl where he was talking and I got to just like observe, like an observer. And I saw how much he was like, nothing is his fault. Nothing, 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 nothing. And the other thing that was fascinating was like, he didn't remember anything. It was either not his fault or I don't remember. Not his fault or I don't remember. The only thing he did remember extremely well is when they asked about his credentials, like his education. And he just knew every single certification, like his resume was 1,000 pages long with 1,000 different certifications, with 1,000 different kinds of, whatever, masters and masters of masters and masters and masters. And he knew that, but he doesn't remember anything else and nothing's his fault. I just thought.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, that selective memory is one of the tools that they use. So, yeah, I don't remember. In other words, it might be incriminating or, that might paint me in a light that I'm not willing to be seen in. So I just conveniently don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lie. It's a lie. They're very untruthful people.
So let's talk about women who are in relationships like this. Is there how do I say this in a female way? Is there a way to fix them to stay in the relationship, or is it just like,
can we fix a narcissist?
Yeah.
Why would you want to?
Well, I'm just saying, at this point in my life, there's no way. However, maybe someone's thinking that question and listening.
Yeah. And look, honestly, I get asked that question all the time. And here's the thing, right? They would have to first acknowledge that they've got a problem. And there's your first issue. Narcissists, their self-image doesn't allow them to admit that they've got a problem. We've just explained that everything is always somebody else's fault. So how are you going to change that deeply embedded pattern of thinking so that they take responsibility? Because if they don't take responsibility, they can't change, right? We all know that.
Right.
So there's the first issue. Can they change? Technically, from a scientific perspective, could they? Yes, everybody could change. Our personality is somewhat malleable, but the reality is the way the narcissist thinks and their deeply embedded, that self-injury that they have, it's very, very unlikely that they're actually ever going to admit they've even got a problem, which would then lead them to actually go and get assistance in order to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they'll pretend they're changing in order to keep their supply. They don't want you jumping the moat right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they'll pretend they're changing. So what I would say is, well, you think about somebody who wants to, do something, somebody who's actually committed to something in their lives, say a marathon. How do you tell? Well, they research marathons, they practice every day, they put themselves in the environment, they ask for feedback on their performance. That's what real commitment looks like, right? So if you are seeing that level of commitment from a narcissist, perhaps they really are willing to change. But if you're not seeing that level of commitment, so they might go, all right, yeah, we'll go along to counselling, but, 3 sessions now, look, I'm done. We don't have a problem, we're fine. Or 3 sessions and, or 2 sessions and I can't relate to this counsellor, and if the counsellor challenges them and actually holds a mirror up to their behaviour, they'll be out after 1 session. So they rarely put themselves in an environment where anything challenges that self-image, that self-belief, because it's so fragile. The chances of them actually engaging meaningfully in counselling is very, very slim.
So the ex and I went to counselling before we ended it for months. And looking back, a lot of it was about, from his view, he's there to fix me.
Yep, heard that so many times, Heather.
Right? And I'm like,
I'm here to support my partner who needs help.
Yeah, she needs help. She's got issues. She obviously needs this. I don't need this. I'm fine. I got my life. I got my stuff going on. I'm happy. I'm successful. She's not happy. I don't know her problem is. Fix her. I'm here. I'm here to be here to make sure you fix her. You know what I mean? It was like that. And looking back, I didn't see that because I was trying to really communicate in a relationship or whatever. I had no idea that it was a supply thing. And then near the end, when I started actually, the counselor would start working with me to help me kind of have a life outside of him. That was how she took me. Right. So she was sort of like, well, let's move you, because we were in business together. Let's move you out and let's focus on what do you want? What do you want to create? What do you, with or without this person? And the moment that started happening, you can kind of see where this was going. He was getting anxiety and more upset and doubling down. And that's when in the middle of that move, basically, of me looking at, yeah, what do I want? Maybe I, don't want to do this business with him and all this stuff. That's when he, what I call, try to suck me back, and he proposed in the middle of that. So in the middle of me like, oh, what do I want to do with my life? And he was like, oh, propose and we'll get married. I was like, wait a minute, wait, what? So it was an interesting kind of way to like bring me back into the fold. And so then now it's like, oh, we're getting married. Now you have to be in the business. Now you have to do this. You didn't really fix her. Now let's focus on fixing her inside of my context called what it looks like to be married to me.
Yeah. And so basically what he's done there is love bombing, right? He's gone, how do I win this person? How do I bring them back into my circle of influence? I know what I'll do. I'll promise a commitment. I'll future fake, which is one of the words we use, that future faking. So yeah, absolutely.
It was a future fake. I didn't know it at the time, but it was about 6 months after the engagement where I started to do things like, because I believe in once you get engaged, you go get married. Like you don't wait around for that. You don't have like these 10-year engagements. Like if you're going to do this, you do it. And so I started to say, well, where are we going to get married? And I started throwing out different places, and let's start getting this on the books in a year from now or 9 months from now. And he went no talk with it. No, not gonna, no, whatever he said, but it was definitely like, we're not talking about that. So there was no date. There was no creation. It was kind of like, you should be happy I proposed, and it was kind of like, well, the proposals, the whole point of that is a commitment and creation of a new life. So it was interesting now looking back. I mean, at the time I just said, well, he's not ready to make a date. That's no big deal. Right. But now looking back, it was a future fake. It was definitely a future fake. There was literally no intention. Like I went to the engagement ring place to get there's a whole other story with the ring sized. Like I go there, and I of course went right into like, well, I didn't pick the ring out. So I would like to have a piece that I picked out for the engagement and then the other part for the wedding. And it was like, no, that's all you get. No, I'm like, wait a minute. I want to have a say, because to him, it was all fake. It was just for me to stick around in the business. It had nothing to do with actually wanting to create a commitment, which is fascinating to me. But what's the third thing?
So the third one is lack of empathy, and a lot of the stuff that you read about narcissists will talk about this lack of empathy. They just are unable to put themselves into your shoes, into your emotions, into how you might be feeling, and that leads to a complete lack of remorse. So when they treat you badly, they literally cannot empathise with how that might have made you feel or why you might be hurt. Which is why you then get these insincere apologies, because they just cannot grasp what they've done that has been so, detrimental or devastating to you. When someone has no empathy, obviously their behaviours are going to be sort of well outside of what you would call normal. So you might find yourself coaching this person about, how to behave like a normal human being. So if you ever find yourself doing that, that should be a really big red flag.
How to be like a normal human being. Well, I can't speak to that one. He didn't do that one very well. He didn't do that one to me. What he did do, though, which near the end I started to see it. I didn't see it. And I shared this with you privately, and my father did the same thing. But again, when you're in, sometimes that old analogy, when you put the frog in the pot of water and the water is like room temperature, and then you slowly heat it up, the frog doesn't know it's in a pot of boiling water. That's kind of the same premise when you're in a relationship with an narcissist. You have no idea it's kind of going on because you're kind of in the water, So this is my experience. So what was happening was, I noticed when we were around people, he was nice to me, I call it. He showed, this is my fiance girlfriend, he was like decent to me. But the moment, and I mean the moment, we were alone, meaning there was no human beings around, he switched. And it started to become even, the switch became, at the beginning, it became small. I didn't see it. And then the switch became bigger, you know, like to a point where I would test it. I would literally be like, he's being mean to me. And nothing's changed other than a person left. Right. And then I would like go out of my way to, I don't care who it was. It could have been like the garbage man. It didn't matter. I thought I'd get around somebody and try to have the same conversation and he would be like nice again. And then I'd remove the person and he would be mean and it would be the same conversation. And I was like, wow, the moment someone's around that could be seen his behavior, he's nice. The moment no one's around, I'm the Antichrist or whatever he has in his head. But yet I'm his, you know, relationship, his source. Can you talk about that? What is that called, or what is that? Why do they do that?
Well, it's impression management, right? Because they don't want other people to see who they truly are. They don't want that evilness inside them being observed by other people. So that impression management is, I want the world to believe that I'm successful, that I've got a successful relationship, that my children are wonderful, that my business is doing well, or I'm excelling in my career, and other people think I'm wonderful and I've got all these accolades, right? So impression management, remembering again that their self-identity is false and they create a completely false world around them. So that impression management, they've got to have those other people validating their experience, validating who they are. If they behaved the way you just described, that being mean in front of everybody, it wouldn't take long for people to be calling them out and going, oh my God, this person's a jerk, right? And so that impression management it does two things. One, it manages how other people think and believe, and it enables them to be able to get what we call flying monkeys, okay? So people that they recruit to be on their team, or as you put it, in their castle, on this side of the moat, their side of the moat. But the other thing that it does is it invalidates you. So you're suddenly going, I must be the bad person. I must be the one with the problem because, you know, he's fine around everybody else. So it's part of that invalidation process as well, and that coercive control of you. These people literally destroy who you are at your core. They eat away. It's like a bacteria or a cancer. They literally eat away at your self-identity because they have none themselves.
Again, if you had this conversation with me 5 years ago, being a strong, independent woman like myself, I would probably say, oh, that sounds like they would never happen to me. But it did. And I think it's because I'm strong and independent that it happened to me. And I want you to talk about that. Let's talk about a little bit, if you don't mind. I know we're going a little over, but the source like that. When I think of a source I'm the source, or the narcissist needs a source, I literally have a visual of a, electricity socket. Yeah. Like they just suck out of it and then they're done, and they just like they throw you away like a bad battery. You know what I mean? Like what is that? Why do they need a source? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, because they don't have a self-identity. They don't, during that formative period where an individual creates this identity of themselves, right? There's an interrupt, there's a problem there, and they don't actually ever create this strong sense of self-identity. So that source, you actually are giving that person their identity. So you are giving them their energy. I love the power socket analogy. I always use leech. It's like, how a leech latches on and sucks blood, but the minute they're full, the minute they've got what they want, they drop off. It's the same kind of analogy. So the reality is, the more sources that they can have, and this might be parents, could be siblings, it could be intimate partners, it could be in the workplace, business partners, it could be followers or groupies, I like to call them. They like to have these groupies, right? And each of those people who are feeding or making me believe the story that I'm creating about my identity. So it can be their children even. My children love me, I must be a good person. My team at work think that I'm a great leader, so I must be a great leader. So anybody who feeds that sense of identity is going to be of value to them. Anybody who starts to question that or not agree with the identity that they're trying to create, or who says, hang on, your actions and your words are contradicting each other, they are not aligned, or, you know, actually I don't agree with what you're saying there, you know, that's just your version of it, but that's not necessarily the truth and it's only one version, then you'll be discarded because you're no longer a valuable source to them. So it's about, I guess, building blocks, or think like Lego blocks. Each little Lego block helps me to create my sense of identity, my sense of self, who I am in the world. And I want this little piece over here from my team that make me feel like a good leader. And I want this little piece over here who's my intimate partner, who makes me feel like a wonderful lover and partner. And I want this little piece over here from my children who idolize me and say that I'm a great dad. So they build this identity from all these little pieces that they take from other people.
It's really true. It's like they compartmentalize their fan base.
Right, right. That's exactly
You know, yeah, it's really true. And like I said, now looking back and learning what I've learned and working with therapists and counselors and reading and certified YouTube videos, what I've learned is that they're like in a box, you know, this person needs to give me this person gives me that, this person gives me that, or this group organization gives me that. I think a big one is the SMART thing, especially for men, where, you know, I've got the certifications, I've got the degrees, I've got the this, that my father is definitely like that. And then he's also extremely competitive. My father's very competitive in tennis. So he kind of uses that as his way to get idolized, right, himself, and his kids and things like that. But it is, to me, what I find fascinating, and want to wrap it up, but what I find fascinating on the no empathy side, right, is like technically, and I know I'm sharing probably too much and right, but technically my father has 4 kids, technically. Right? He had 2 marriages, 4 children. I'm the first round, as he calls it, the first mistake, he calls it. So we don't exist. Me and my sister in his world literally do not exist. How? Like, from why? You know, it's always like, and of course people, what happens is people go, y'all must have done something wrong. No, we've done nothing wrong. You know, we never try to shoot him or kill him, or I wanted to in my head, you know, or stole from him or any of that. Like, we've done nothing. So it's just an interesting, he's made it a point that we are dead. And then everyone in his life, including his current wife and his 2 other children, we're dead to them too. Not necessarily because they have anything against us, but because they had to choose. They had to choose which country to be in. And they're not allowed to be in both. And I think that's part of the thing with a narcissist. They had this ability of like, you have to be in my world. And if you're not in my world and you pick their world, like a gang member, if you're friends with anybody in that gang, you're out, you know? And that's not how life is. Like, I technically have I've had brother and half sister and a stepmother, and they won't talk, like they will not talk to me and my sister. We're dead to them. We didn't do anything to them. So, but that's the ability of a narcissist to literally create this separation, you know, and a separation so vast that I think after years and years and maybe funerals of like, why do we not talk? I'm like, I have no idea. You know, I have no idea. I think it's interesting. That's that empathy. Because at the end of the day, I think a normal person would be like, hey, I don't have a relationship with this person. I choose not to have a relationship with this person. But at the end of the day, other people, my family, get to choose what you want in life. And you get to choose if you want a relationship with them or not. Like, you get to choose. You don't have to have my same belief system. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's very sad. Where can people find you though and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more?
Yeah. So www.liminal, Liminil coaching.com.au, because I'm in Australia.
Say it one more time just in case someone didn't catch it.
So it's liminalcoaching.com.au.
Okay, great. And we'll have that in the show notes. So as we wrap up here, Karen, can you just give us some, I don't know, tips, tricks?
Yeah. So I guess one of the really important things is, you know, if you see those red flags, don't argue with yourself. That's one of the big things that we do see is that people often do see the red flags, but they explain them away. They make excuses for them. Mm-hmm. So you really need to just stand back and say, I'm going to give this person the time to show me who they are. And that's because they will reveal who they are. So don't get into a relationship quickly. The other thing that you can do that's a really, really quick test, the smiling no. Because narcissists don't like conflict at all, say no early in the relationship and test it. So if they respect your boundaries and they respect your no, that's great. But a narcissist won't. They'll actually start to try the emotional manipulation or the coercion or whatever it is to get you to go along with what they want, because there is only what they want, right? So the smiling no, issue it early in a relationship.
Smiling no. Wow. I'm looking back in my head. Did I ever do that? I did say no a couple times at the beginning, and it was met with not like a yelling and screaming, but like, okay, you can say no, but like, you're stupid. Why would you say no? That's stupid. You know what I mean? Like that. It was more like that. Like, well, you're stupid then. And like there's a visceral reaction to that of like, why am I stupid? Just because, and then you start to question, well, maybe I'm stupid. Yeah. For me, I was like, I'm questioning, tell me the wrong choice, and then I would go, well, tell me, of course, and I would say, well, tell me why your answer is yes. And then they would say whatever. And I would be like, oh, I can see that point of view, because that's me. I can see that point of view. But instead of doubling down and using it as a test, of like, no, I would say, okay, I can see that. I'll go with that view, because I wasn't looking at it as a test. I think looking back, if I was going on a date now or something, I would use it as a test to see how he or she would, question that kind of thing.
How they push back against.
Yeah, how they push back. I do find that, let me ask you a question, let me wrap it up. Do you find that narcissism runs in families type of thing? It runs.
Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why we say that there is a genetic trait, because it does run in families. We never ever see one narcissist alone. So when I see it, I can always then trace it back into previous generations, a parent, a grandparent, siblings, aunts, uncles. It'll be scattered right throughout the family tree.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can see that. I'm looking back in my family as well as his and my father's, and there's definitely signs of ancestral, like that. One more question. Sorry. Was okay, one more question. Do you find that many narcissists have some kind of addictive behavior with alcohol or abuse on some level? Or is that...
There is absolutely often a comorbidity that runs with, so comorbidity means, occurs with, right? So we do often see addictive behaviours. It might be alcohol, it could be gambling, it could be sex, could be drugs. So yes, very, very frequently.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I'm going to play one more question. Okay, thank you so much. Say your website one more time, Karen.
liminalcoaching.com.au, and don't forget, Fix Your Man Picker is available for pre-sale now.
Oh, it is. Is it on Amazon?
Not yet. It won't be on Amazon, but you can get it through my website right now.
Oh, okay, great.
It will be on Amazon eventually.
So, by the way, I want to say it in a Texan way. Fix your picker.
Your man picker.
Fix your man picker. Sorry, that sounds really bad sexual, so I'm trying to make it not sexual. Fix your man picker, which basically means, ladies, how you pick and choose men, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, everyone, this is Heather Havenwood. Check me out at heatherhavenwood.com, and thank you for listening to Like a Boss. I hope that this interview you like, not like, comment, not comment. Please reach out to me and let me know what you think of this. If you think that someone in your life is potentially in maybe domestic abuse of some sort, or maybe needs help, or maybe just who's at the end of a narcissistic relationship, really needs help, I highly suggest you reach out to Karen or just a local professional help, because it's not something you can do alone. So I highly suggest you reach out to a professional counselor in your local area or Karen. All right, this is Heather Havenwood, heatherhavenwood.com.